Right, so the next item to discuss is how West Yorkshire Police is tackling the firearms threat, and obviously I've had a chance to have a quick look at the report that you've provided. Would you like to introduce the report?
Yes, certainly, Commissioner, and thank you for the opportunity to run through quite a lot of good work which is going on in West Yorkshire at this moment to tackle firearms crime. I was conscious when I was preparing the report that it's an area which we don't tend to put that much information into the public domain. The main reasons for that are the fact that some of our investigative techniques and some of our firearms tactics we don't like to share too widely, because criminal groupings who we're seeking to arrest just will be alerted to them and be able to avoid justice. So there's always been a little bit of a reluctance in the past to put too much in, but at the same time I think it's quite important, given the work's going on, that we do share more. So I've tried to put as much as I can in this paper, really with a view that it can be published quite openly in public on your website, and should you wish to circulate it to key stakeholders around the county, then you'd be more than welcome to do so. When I prepared the paper, I was aware there's quite a bit of good news in here, in the sense of, if you look at the firearms discharges that we're currently sustaining in the county, you could draw the false conclusion that firearms wasn't a really serious problem. And in that sense, I'm just worried that we could become a victim of our own success. So this is the reason I've put a little bit more information in. So first of all, in terms of the threat, getting into the early paragraphs here, our main problems to do with firearms are to do with organised crime groups, and specifically in the areas of Leeds, Bradford and Kirklees. Those are the three districts which particularly have a problem, and have had that problem over a number of years. The use of the firearms is largely to protect criminal enterprises, typically drugs dealing, and protecting cash and other criminal assets. The settling of scores, the use to intimidate other rivals, that's the typical usage, and I think our usage in that sense is similar in other large urban areas of the country. Whilst therefore I could say to you that we could reassure the public that, generally speaking, the threat to an ordinary member of the public from a firearm is very low indeed. It's between criminal groups. We just have to recognise that the criminal discharge of firearms presents a risk to the public when it happens, and also in terms of the way people feel in terms of their own public confidence in their neighbourhoods. It has a really detrimental effect. So it's a high priority and remains a high priority for the force. Just in terms of the last 3 years in particular, whilst we've always seen this as a priority, we've put a real focus upon it and developed additional tactics, which I shall go on to later on. And I think in terms of context, we're in a county of nearly 2.5 million, and over the last 12 months we've had only 21 firearms discharges, which I think, in terms of context, I think shows that we are on top of a problem which is of concern to the public. I've included some data on page 2 in particular. The first chart shows the number of discharges and the discharges in relation to the district, and you can see that since the year 2007 and 8 we are now at the lowest level of discharges that we've actually seen over a calendar year. And I think one highlight I would put, that in the years 2010 and 11, 2011-12 and 2012-13, the level of discharges in the Bradford district alone were higher than the total number of discharges last year. And we've clearly brought the Bradford problem well under control. So it's a very positive picture. The second chart that I show you there is a rolling 12-month total. So that just literally, as each month ticks on, it really shows what trend over time, and you can see we have since the end of 2011 had a very positive picture of decrease in terms of firearms discharge offences. So that's the sort of the picture in terms of the discharges. Just in terms of structure, and I know you will be familiar with this, I've been involved in force for many years, but I thought it would be helpful for others. I've just outlined some of the key business areas that work to tackle firearms crime. The first is our Protective Services Operations area, which is our uniformed sort of area where we have our authorised firearms officers, and we largely deploy them in two ways. Firstly, in uniform in armed response vehicles, which are commonly seen by the public and operate 24/7 across the year. And then we also have an armed crime tactical team. The officers there are specialist firearms officers. They receive additional training, and they tend to be deployed in plain clothes, not exclusively, but most of their operations are within a covert arena. That's the operational side, but similarly and just as importantly, the Protective Services Crime Area that my colleague ACC Foster manages deploy a number of specialist detectives who investigate firearms criminality, and they do it in two ways. First of all, reactive investigations. Every time we have a discharge, so the 21 that I mentioned earlier, whenever we have one of those, a very thorough investigation is put in place to ensure that any evidential opportunities to identify and convict a suspect is taken, so that we don't have people repeatedly being involved in discharges and not appear in a court and stand in justice. And then the other area is proactive investigations, and this is areas where rather than just concentrate on a single individual, we identify known organised crime groups and we start to conduct a proactive investigation against the whole group, commonly using a conspiracy offence. And the aim then is to actually convict the whole group and effectively take them out of play in terms of the threat they pose in a particular district or in a particular locality. Operation Courts, which has been running for some time, are teams of proactive investigators, but they're drawn from the 5 districts that we have, so they are district officers, and we use them at a lower tier of offending, and particularly they deal with any intelligence that comes through. So if someone were to ring in Crime Stoppers, and we get a lot of useful information coming through Crime Stoppers, that intelligence goes to them, and they look to make sure it's acted upon quickly. The other advantage of them being local district officers is they build knowledge against known criminals involved in firearms, and we keep a good foot on the intelligence picture. And then just finally, and it's slightly different I suppose, but I think it's worthy of mentioning, the work we do on firearms licensing. This is nothing to do with organised crime groups, this is to do with legitimate people who wish to hold a shotgun or a firearms certificate as a sporting interest commonly. And as I'll go on to talk about some of the detail, making sure that those people look after their weapons correctly and dispose of them or sell them correctly is a very important way of ensuring they don't fall into criminal hands and then get used in shootings on our streets.
Sorry, Mark, if I could just stop you there. So perhaps, you know, clearly the governance structures are there set out, and that's fine. So if we move to the armed operations and the results section, I think that would be absolutely useful. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to bring out in the paper was, whilst the headline picture might be 21 discharges, there's a great deal of activity that is sat behind that. First of all, in terms of our ARVs on patrol, we make the point in the first paragraph there that they obviously primarily stand ready to respond to a firearms incident, but they also support colleagues in ordinary policing. I describe it like this: when we give a firearms officer their firearms permit, we don't take away their warrant card, and they still have a responsibility to keep the peace, prevent and detect crime, and protect the public, and they do that. They also do a lot of work in support of the ambulance service because they're medically trained, so quite commonly they are the first to arrive or support ambulance colleagues in giving critical first aid, so they save people's lives to our firearms officers. In terms of some of their activity, and all these figures really are for the year 2014-15, that's April to April. Our ARVs, they attended 332 spontaneous incidents which required an armed response, so about 1 per day on average. In terms of planned operations, so these are ones where we are thinking of doing a firearms operation, we agree that that's what we're going to do, and we actually put a written plan into place. We conducted 216 planned operations in the last financial year. 29 of those were protection visits for VIPs, either politicians or royal family. And in terms of the use of firearms, we discharged a weapon, our weapons as in police firearms, on 7 occasions, all of which relate to the humane destruction of animals. We're called upon to deal sometimes with dangerous dogs that are going wild in people's houses or on the street, and also livestock, commonly, I have to say, bulls and cattle that are on a highway and posing an immediate threat to the public. So at no point during the previous year we actually fired at any person. And then some of the activities in terms of these operations, as I say, 91 specialist firearms operations were conducted by our armed crime tactical team. We've made 548 arrests as a result of these firearms operations. We've seized 39 illegally held firearms, and I don't have all the details for the drugs and cash, so I got a picture just collected for January and February of 2015. And just in those two months, we see 70 kilograms of Class A drugs and £500,000 in cash, much of which obviously comes through the proceeds of crime and to the schemes that you're administering here at the office. Yeah. So in the past, maybe the seizure of drugs and the seizure of cash drew a headline, but for us, it's not that they are evidence of the criminality of these groups. So the fact that we're seizing this not only disrupts them, but it provides real evidence against criminals in court. So that gives you some good examples there. I talk briefly about assertive management, and again, this is something I can't provide more detail in this forum, but where we have people we are concerned are actively planning reprisal attacks, commonly against rivals, our firearms officers undertake assertive management. We regularly visit people who are on bail, or visit people who we have information maybe wishing to threaten others, and in a sense, by monitoring and managing them, we actually prevent something happening in the first place. So there's a lot of work goes into that as well. In fact, if you want me just to move on to the firearms licensing, I think the key points there are the fact that got some quite large numbers in terms of what we're managing. A fairly small unit of people, about 13 people in the firearms licensing unit, none of them police officers. 14,000 authorised certificate holders in the county, 11,000 of those are shotgun, and 3,000 are what we call Section 1 firearms, which become a rifle or a handgun. Of those 14,000 licences, they're held by about 11,500 individuals, and between them they possess about 35,000 certificate firearms. We monitor those people quite robustly, so every 24 hours, if any of those people came to our notice through our police systems, we would be alerted to that, and we would look into the circumstances. Whilst that may be on occasions people, say, becoming involved in a crime, they may equally just be a victim of crime, so obviously we would discount that. So we actively monitor the situation, and we do spot checks in relation to those individuals, mainly to ensure that they keep their guns within the cabinets, and also in terms of those certain, if they're going to get rid of weapons, we check that the weapons they have in their cabinets match the certificate as well. Over the course of the previous 12 months, we refused 22 applications for a firearms certificate, and in terms of people we were unhappy with their safety, and I personally take that decision, we revoked 65 certificates. So hopefully that will give you a picture about there's a great deal of work goes on in the background, and it's having a really positive result for the public in keeping them safe.
Thanks so much for that report, which is quite comprehensive, and I think you know, obviously it is a sensitive area in terms of operational information and intelligence, but you know, I welcome the fact that you are sharing a level of information that I think is in the public interest, because obviously use of firearms and the threat of firearms is a very serious issue for all of us, and the fact that the results that you referred to, particularly in relation to Bradford, and the numbers of incidents that have decreased significantly, are very good. So is there any particular reason, do you think, behind that improvement?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think you first yourself, Commissioner, I think you met with a number of politicians early on after being elected as Police and Crime Commissioner, and gun crime at that time featured in a lot of the public surveys. It was an area of real public concern. So some of the proactive operations that I talked about earlier, we very much started those off in the Bradford area, and I can tell you, although I can't go into the details of it, we have active operations as we speak going on against Bradford criminals. So I think the reduction in firearms crime in Bradford has been a direct result of a number of investigations against significant criminal groupings there. So it is a result of positive police action by some of the specialist teams, but also by the district teams as well. Yeah,
and the fact that only 7 discharges by the firearms team,
yes.
You know, is a really low number, and yet you still managed to improve the situation, which, you know, I think is a really good result.
Yeah, I mean there's a great deal, it's explained in the paper again, of command that goes in terms of the deployments, and there's a lot of discipline, a lot of training and a lot of professionalism displayed by our officers, often in difficult situations. So I think we've much to be proud of in the work that they're actually doing, and it's clear it's having a real impact for the public. Yeah,
and I have had the opportunity fairly recently to visit the firearms training complex up at Cargate, and the investment we've made there is second to none, and hopefully we can maximise that facility for our own staff and others within the region going forward. I know you touched on the applications for licences, you know, and I'm pleased to hear about those safeguards that are in place. The ones that were refused or revoked, again, relatively low in numbers, but is that, in terms of previous years, is it more or less? Or
it's broadly the same ballpark. Commonly we have 50 or so revocations over the course of the year, so we had a few more last year. We don't target those, so it's just simply if information comes to light, sometimes relatives call us in, or other witnesses ring us in, or sometimes it's our own officers pick up on something that we have to manage, then we sort of deal with it, and we have quite we respond to those quite urgently, because it's not just the public at large which may be at risk. I have to say, sadly, for some of those revocations, the individuals concerned, often for mental health reasons, were vulnerable themselves, so we look to turn those around really rapidly, and I'm not talking about in days, I'm talking about literally in hours. And that's the way we deal with it. So broadly speaking, that's a similar picture to previous years, but we run quite a tight ship.
And just finally, in general terms, given the pressures that we are under financially, with the reduction in police officers, police staff, government cuts to our budgets, are you fairly reassured around the proportionality of the capability that we have within the firearms team in West Yorkshire?
Well, we have a national policing requirement, of course, around the number of authorised firearms officers that we have and the different levels of training that they have to have within that, and also a regional strategic threat and risk assessment process that, again, we also have to meet and play our part in. So it isn't as simple as what is just purely West Yorkshire resource. Mark has to manage the wider picture and think about those requests where we might have to provide support, such as to the Olympics or to the G8, as well as also being able to manage a lot of these types of incidents, types of cases. And it's because of the proactivity that has been undertaken by these officers together with other support teams that we've managed to reduce the number of discharges and reduce the level of threat within West Yorkshire. But we must not take our proverbial eye off this ball, because it is very definitely out there. And so, irrespective of how the austerity measures may hit the force, this is an area for me that we need to keep absolute focus on, and we will have to reconfigure, however that might be, to make sure that we've got the firearms capability to be able to respond to incidents.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point.